G'day, welcome back to Mr. Centric. You're with Mark. Thanks for joining me. Today, I thought we'd have a chat about some of the things that I've learned as a fragrance collector. So I've put together 11 things that I really wish that I knew when I first started that would have helped me save time and money. This is my list. You might have more, and if you do, I'd love you to drop me a comment and share it with everyone. So let's start with point number one. So the first point is that strength doesn't necessarily mean a stronger smell. And that refers to the oil concentration. In a previous video, I covered off on this in detail, so check that out. But in a nutshell, there's different oil concentrations that you need to be aware of. There's an eau de cologne, an eau de toilette, an eau de parfum, and a parfum extrait that all have different oil concentrations that perform differently. When I first started collecting, I would have assumed that a parfum is the strongest because it has the highest oil content, but that's actually not the case. An EDT might be louder than a parfum only because the parfum is denser and it is longer lived, but it's denser, so it won't be as loud. So keep that in mind. If you want to know more about that, check out my previous video. So the second point is that notes are really just marketing. If you've ever looked up the notes of a fragrance on Fragrantica or Base Notes, that's really what the companies want you to think that the fragrance will smell like. But in reality, it doesn't always work that way. That's why there's some fragrances that have 3 notes and some have 20, and they really don't smell that much different. So what matters is how it performs on your skin. How quickly does it evaporate, become a skin scent? How does it work on your skin chemistry? And what's the dry down like 2 hours after you've sprayed it on your skin? Don't really judge the fragrance on the first spray because as it dries down, it most likely will change. So the third point is modern versus vintage. I didn't know a lot about vintage fragrances when I first started collecting. I do now, and I collect them. And the main reason is because they're just so interesting and so different to the ones of today. It really does make you feel like you're going back in a time machine. Vintage fragrances use notes that we don't use today or we can't use today. They used a lot more oak moss, animalics, natural musks, and they were less about being mass appealing and more about standing out. So modern fragrances of today, they really are mass appealing for the most part. They're sweet. Some, smell like bubble gum, whereas you're not going to find that with vintage fragrances. If you're bored of what they're bringing out today, then I encourage you to look back at vintage. You might find some real hidden gems. So the fourth point is that your skin changes everything. Fragrances will react differently on everyone, and that is because of skin chemistry, diet, hydration, could be climate, sometimes could even be medication. And that explains why fragrances can smell so differently on paper versus skin, and why performance can be so different between person to person. So don't judge a fragrance without wearing it fully on your skin to see how it performs and reacts. Number 5 is that longevity doesn't necessarily mean quality. So some of the greatest fragrances are subtle and elegant. They sit closer to the skin and invite people to come close to you. They fade gracefully instead of screaming off your skin for 12 hours. So a fragrance can be beautiful and fleeting, kind of like a good meal and not a protein bar. Number 6 is that blends matter more than ingredients. What that means is don't obsess over notes or get caught up in individual notes. What really matters is how is a fragrance blended, because a single note could smell completely different in a fragrance depending on how it's used in the formula. A good blend is going to feel intentional, and a bad one can feel screechy and off-putting. Number 7 is that price doesn't necessarily mean better quality. I've found expensive fragrances that, in my opinion, were boring, definitely overhyped, and sometimes poor performing. On the flip side, I've also found cheap fragrances that were really smart, wearable, and good as a signature scent. In fact, my current signature scent is under $50 and you can get it online now, and it's really good quality, and I'll be reviewing that one shortly. Point number 8 is that seasons are just guidelines, they're not laws. So we all know that fresh fragrances shine in the heat and that dense fragrances cut through the cold, but personality, environment, and usage matter more. Basically, you can use what you want when you want, depending on the situation. Just adjust your sprays accordingly. Point number 9 is that you don't need a standard operating procedure to apply fragrances. Don't be afraid to spray. If you want to stand out, spray more. If you don't, spray less. Just test and adjust accordingly. Most importantly, if a fragrance isn't working for you, just stop using it. Point number 10 is that your nose needs training time. When I first started smelling fragrances, some to me smelt strange, even confusing, sometimes even disgusting. But the more I smelt different notes and became accustomed to them, when I went back to those earlier fragrances, to me they actually smelt totally different. And some of those are now my favorite fragrances, whereas at the beginning I didn't like them. So the point is your taste will change over time as you become accustomed to different notes. Point number 11, and the last point, is collect experiences, not bottles. Try and test more than you buy. Don't get caught up in the latest hype, and don't buy 10 of the same fragrances. You don't need 10 vanilla fragrances. One is enough. So do your research, test, and justify every purchase. If you don't miss a fragrance that you're not wearing, then you don't need it. Guys, thanks for sticking with me. That was my 11 things that I wish I knew when I first started collecting fragrances. If you've got any tips or suggestions, let me know in the comments. If you like this type of fragrance content, then please subscribe and join me for more. But for now, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.